it's hard to say what's going to happen with assets. It seems to me we have this super weird experiment going on with with interest rates, where the interest rates keep going lower and lower, and is that going to be sustainable or not? If they can keep the interest rates as low as they are, maybe a lot of asset prices can be stabilized. If it finally breaks, that's going to be probably a challenge, across the board. But yeah, I know probably the one asset that I most strongly believe in. As an investor, you often want to find things that are so stupid that other investors are embarrassed to invest in them. And so, for example, the FANG stocks were an instance of a stupid asset. It was the really big tech stocks. It was just Jim Cramer came up with the FANG acronym on Mad Money in 2014. If you just followed his advice, you would have made 8 times your money in the last 6 years. You've done better than any venture capitalist. It was too stupid in a way. And so if my candidate for the investment that is so big and so stupid that professional money managers are embarrassed to do it because it suggests they're not doing enough work is to just buy Bitcoin. We have a strange monetary experiment. Maybe you should be long gold, but gold is still the old economy asset, and probably it's Bitcoin more than gold, and nobody's in that one. So that would be my bullish advice, although maybe it's also bearish on a lot of stuff implicitly.
What should business leaders and policymakers be worried about with AI? How should we frame the topic of AI with policymakers?
I think it's one of the areas where Washington, D.C. policymakers tend to be quite weak on all these technology things. And the sense I always get is that people often don't really, they just use these things as buzzwords, and everybody in the room uses them as buzzwords, and nobody even knows what they mean. And there was an Obama administration document, a friend of mine pointed me out the other day, where if you used every instance of the word AI and you replaced it with computer, it still made just as much sense. And so, it's sort of like we should at least acknowledge that this is sort of roughly where the policymakers are, where they don't understand the difference between the word AI and computer. If you can do a search and replace in a document, and it still means as much or as little as before, we somehow don't understand this.
Is this because they're not digital natives, or because they're too far removed from where technology is being created, or why do you think that is?
It's somehow there's a discourse about technology where everybody in the room knows that they don't know what they're talking about, and they can just use the same buzzwords in a way that makes no sense. So I think if we were to make AI less abstract, is it the next generation of computing? Is it the last generation of computing? Is it superhuman intelligence? Is it just sort of big data, machine learning applied in certain kinds of narrow context? So I think you have to always sort of concretize it very, very specifically. I would say certainly one dimension of it that seems to me to be quite important to policymakers is, should we be thinking of this as a weapon, that it's going to be used in conjunction with cyber, in conjunction with other weapon systems, and that this is sort of what is really at stake in the AI race between the US and China. And even framing it that way pushes you into very uncomfortable space for Silicon Valley. So I think we have to just avoid hiding behind the abstractions. Or it's like the Huawei 5G thing is again it's a discussion about very particular things about 5G. How does it roll out? Do we need it? What are the actual alternatives? And hiding behind just the 5G buzzword just obfuscates way more than it illuminates.
What do you think about our relationship with China right now? It's obviously very complicated and it's fraught. But, I think a lot of our listeners want to know what you think about it.
It's been quite hard to figure out a way to create a real win-win dynamic between the two societies. And certainly there are parts of our society that have benefited and that have done well. I think it's quite a bit less than it was 13, 14 years ago. So, maybe there were some very unhealthy things about the China relationship in the mid-2000s, but there was a broad cross-section of U.S. business leaders that believed it would be good for their businesses, that China was a natural expansion market. And, if you say what sectors of the U.S. economy still believe in China, I would say it is a subset of Wall Street. So it's sort of asset gatherers on Wall Street because they get money from China. It is Hollywood, and it is the universities. And that is a relatively narrow pro-China constituency. It's mostly a Democratic Party one, but it's probably too narrow even for the Democratic Party. And so I think even in the Biden administration, it's unclear whether those industry groupings will be enough to overcome, the very real challenges from China in, military arms race and, hollowing out manufacturing in the U.S. in, IP theft. So there are all these other places where the relationship is very challenged. And I think it will be quite hard to get it to a healthy place from here.